Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a little bit longer-term technical analysis on Bitcoin, because in today's video, I want to discuss this longer-term ascending triangle pattern that everybody's been talking about on Bitcoin for the last couple of months. I have yet to really weigh in on it because I wanted to let this pattern marinate a little bit. I wanted to let it season. I wanted to let it grow. I wanted to let it develop before we start doing a lot of technical analysis on it, but that doesn't mean I don't think it's important. I've seen a lot of people talking about this in my comments section. I've seen other YouTubers do videos on it, and I do think it's a valid pattern that we need to be paying attention to. So in today's video, we're going to be doing some technical analysis, especially some longer-term technical analysis on this longer-term ascending triangle pattern here at the bottom of the Bitcoin bear market. So if you guys enjoy what we have to say today, and if you guys enjoy today's video, definitely consider dropping a like, hitting that subscribe button, and smashing that notification bell, guys. It does help out the channel when you do that, and I would be appreciative if you did it. But without much further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it, guys. We're going to start with a little bit more shorter-term technical analysis so that we can build into the main topic of today's video. Bitcoin, at the moment anyway, is currently trading around $3,970. And as you may know, Bitcoin, back over here on the 15th of March, decided that it was going to break bullish. And instead of breaking bullish again after it went into this kind of flag right here, Bitcoin has decided to trade sideways. And as you can see that I've drawn since the last video, Bitcoin is currently in somewhat of a pennant right here. Bitcoin is moving sideways after breaking bullish here, and it's very possible that Bitcoin comes here and breaks bullish out of this pennant. That's not the topic of today's video, but do watch out for that, because there very well may be some kind of breakout from this pennant, depending on how you want to draw these lines. Now, these aren't perfect, of course. You could, in theory, draw them like that, or you can draw them like that if you're going to use the candle bodies. You could draw this bottom uptrend of support a little bit different. The point is here, Bitcoin is in some kind of pennant slash trading channel, depending on how you draw it, and Bitcoin probably is going to break either bullish or bearish out of this in the next couple of days. We'll do some more technical analysis on that as the time gets nearer for that breakout to happen. I do want to point out the volume hasn't really dropped off all that much. It's actually picked up a little bit here on the hourly chart, but that is a pattern you're going to want to look out for on the short term. Anyway, if we start zooming out, we start looking at the longer term technicals for Bitcoin, and I especially get rid of these two downtrends right here, that one and that one, then it really kind of redefines the entire way that we look at the market. Instead of looking at the market as Bitcoin trending downward here generally over the last couple of weeks, it really now looks like Bitcoin has been trending to the upside over the last couple of weeks. And that's one of the points I wanted to make in today's video, was that sometimes you get so caught up in your own technical analysis and you start looking at the same lines over and over and over again. You don't take a step to zoom out, look at a fresh chart. That's one of the reasons I have my Bitfinex chart that I don't do a whole lot of TA on. Sometimes you don't take the time to step out and zoom out and look at another chart and realize that there's a lot more going on the chart than you were paying attention to. And one thing that we've noticed recently, and that has obviously been paying a big part in Bitcoin, is this uptrend of support right here. This uptrend of support has been pushing Bitcoin to the upside, and it's been moving Bitcoin, it's been gradually helping Bitcoin rally over the last couple of weeks, really since about halfway through February, when Bitcoin set a bottom down here and defined another uptrend of support, this one right here. Bitcoin has been gradually trending to the upside over the last couple of weeks, and really it feels like that momentum's running out, because it feels that if Bitcoin were going to break out here, it may have already done it. Now, that's not to say it's not going to. It's very possible that Bitcoin breaks out here and starts moving to the upside. There are levels of resistance I want to look at in the future of this video when we talk about the longer term ascending triangle pattern, but I do feel that the bulls, are losing a bit of their momentum. And I think one of the reasons for that is because Bitcoin is getting so close to that longer-term downtrend of resistance, namely the one that forms the top of this ascending triangle pattern. Now, of course, this ascending triangle pattern has a level of resistance, and it would be right here. You could call this a typical pennant, a triangle pattern, a symmetrical triangle pattern is what you would call it, but I have seen other people draw it as a flat level of support as well, a flat level of resistance as well, with something like this, and they draw it something like that. It really looks like a flat level on the longer term time frames, but I like to draw it as a downtrend, because if you look in with more resolution on the shorter term time scales, looking at different time frames is something we discuss a lot in CT2A, because it's very important to understand what's going on in different time frames so that you can get the best technical analysis and the highest resolution technical analysis that you can. If you look at the 4-hourly and the hourly chart, this looks more like a downtrend of resistance. So it really looks like Bitcoin is getting close to this downtrend of resistance, and it doesn't look like Bitcoin has a whole lot of momentum left to push through it. And there's a very good reason for that we'll be discussing here in just a second. But Bitcoin has been moving up here inside of this ascending triangle pattern, and really symmetrical triangle pattern, depending on how you draw it. Of course, I've called it an ascending triangle pattern, a symmetrical triangle pattern. Either way, the technical analysis that we're about to do is going to be very similar, no matter which one of those patterns it is. But the reason I'm saying both of those is because you probably heard it been called one or the other. I'm, from here on out, going to call it a symmetrical triangle pattern, though. Bitcoin has been moving up here and testing this as a level of resistance over the last couple of weeks, and it's very possible that Bitcoin comes up here and tests that again. It would not surprise me at all if Bitcoin broke bullish out here and moved up to around $4,100. Now, with that said, as we continue zooming out, we look at the daily chart, one thing that we're going to see is the we're on the weekly chart is where I mean to be. Out here on the weekly chart, what we're going to see is that the 20 weekly simple moving average is coming down here and giving us resistance right now. Now, this is a little bit wonky, so I need to zoom in really far. Let's go all the way down here, and as you can see, Bitcoin at the moment anyway is getting resistance in the zone of that 20 weekly simple moving average. Bitcoin at the moment is nowhere near the exponential moving average. It would be up here, but Bitcoin at the moment is testing resistance and kind of already broken through the 20 weekly simple. Now, with that said, Bitcoin does have a couple more weeks to actually stay above that moving average before I would consider that a proper breakout, but the point is Bitcoin is sitting up here in the area of that 20 exponential moving average. If Bitcoin can stay above it, that'll be very bullish for Bitcoin, but that is a level of resistance we're looking at. And of course, guys, what you also have to realize is that out here on the weekly chart, we're also still being bolstered by this 200 weekly moving average right there. Right there. It's almost the exact same area as this uptrend of support. Right there. That's exactly where that is. It's a very important uptrend of support that we definitely don't want to discount. Now, with all that said, let's go back to the daily chart and start discussing this ascending triangle pattern or symmetrical triangle pattern, like I said, whichever you want to call it. Now, there's a very important reason that I want to talk about this, and it goes in line with a lot of the bearish sentiment that I've been elaborating on and discussing and doing technical analysis around over the last couple of weeks. And a lot of you guys have been concerned that I'm being too bearish, and it's very possible that I am being too bearish. It is very possible that Bitcoin is more bullish than I'm giving it credit for. It's very possible that Bitcoin breaks this downtrend of resistance and then Bitcoin starts moving to the upside. But guys, what you have to realize is that technical analysis is, to quote the title of a video from CT2A, it is a game of statistics and probabilities. Bitcoin is not about certainties, it is about probabilities. And based on the longer term technical analysis that I have at my fingertips that I can show you guys, the technical analysis that I have seen to be very important and impactful and work in previous markets, I can say with some certainty that Bitcoin is slightly more bearish right now than it is bullish, at least on the longer term time frames. And I want to be very specific with what I say about longer term time frames. I mean the next 2 months. The next month to the next 2 months, maybe the next 2.5 months. That's what I mean by longer term. The next 6 months I think are very bullish. The next 12 months I think are very bullish. But the next month to 2.5 months, that time period from around the beginning of April on through maybe about halfway through June, I expect this period in here, somewhere around here, we're going to see some kind of big bearish price action. And the reason I think the longer term time frames are still very bullish have to do with fundamentals, and they have to do with a lot of other technicals that we're not really diving into in today's video. But one of them, of course, would be the weekly MACD. Of course, the weekly MACD has been very bullish over the last little while and has actually been getting more bullish as the weeks go by. But that doesn't mean that we can't see a short-term correction. And of course, I just said long-term, and then I said short-term to define the same term. I mean short-term relative to the next year, short-term being that 1 month to 2.5 month time period that I'm talking about here. And of course, one of the main reasons I look at that has to do with the symmetrical triangle pattern, but it also has to do with the weekly MACD. So the weekly stochastic RSI, the weekly stochastic RSI has crossed bearish. We are sitting up here around strong levels of resistance up here around $4,100. It's not a long shot to say that Bitcoin is about to be very bearish in the next 2 to 3 weeks or so. It's not at all. So let's go ahead and dive into this ascending triangle pattern, this symmetrical triangle pattern, and really get to the bottom of why this is so important. And I really want to explain why I haven't talked about it that much either. I have discussed this uptrend of support, and I have discussed this downtrend of resistance. I have discussed it as a pattern, and I have discussed Bitcoin breaking it. But I haven't really discussed the mechanics of why Bitcoin might break it and the market forces that might cause Bitcoin to do so. What you have to understand about symmetrical triangle patterns is that they are typically continuation patterns. If I come back over here into Bitcoin's history, I believe I can find an example of this. I know I can, actually. If we go to the 4-hourly chart and we zoom all the way back to 2017, I don't know why this market just popped into my head, but I know over here somewhere there's an ascending triangle pattern or a triangle pattern that I can show you guys, and it was right over here. Now, we saw Bitcoin move into a couple of ascending triangle patterns. We saw Bitcoin move into a triangle pattern right here. Let's go ahead and analyze this one. Bitcoin had moved into a triangle pattern right here. It was very bullish. Bitcoin had been moving very bullish, and in fact, it had just come out of an ascending triangle pattern as well. One right there. And one right there. Bitcoin had just come out of one. It was moving to the upside. Bitcoin was very bullish, of course. We are moving up towards the end of the 2017 bull market. We're on the 4-hourly chart looking at 2017 right now. Bitcoin was very bullish and it went into these patterns, and these patterns were pointed to the upside. Now, a lot of times you'll find triangle patterns that are pointed sideways. If we can find one of those really quickly, I'll give you an example of that as well, but it doesn't look like I can find one right over here. Of course, it's been a year and a half since I've been doing TA on this market, so forgive me for not knowing it like the back of my hand as I do the newer markets. But normally when Bitcoin moves into a consolidation pattern, which is what this would be, a triangle pattern, a symmetrical triangle pattern, a continuation pattern, all of those terms are different, but they mean somewhat similar things in this context. When you are looking at a pattern like this, they are typically what are known as continuation patterns. When you move into a pattern that has two trend lines, a resistance line and a support line, converging on themselves, typically what that means is that you are looking at a continuation pattern. And at the moment, right over here, in December of 2017, Bitcoin moved into one, and it moved into that one, and of course, Bitcoin did, for a time, continue that pattern. For another 12 to 16 hours or so, Bitcoin continued that pattern all the way up to $20,000, and then, of course, Bitcoin fell off. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when you move into a continuation pattern, well, markets have a tendency to continue doing what they're doing. Apparently I still have some examples of this drawn from over a year ago, back over here on February, so we'll go ahead and look at these. These are a couple of continuation patterns I want to point out. For example, Bitcoin was fell down here to $6,000, bounced up, moved into this pattern, and then broke bullish because this was a continuation pattern. It was a symmetrical triangle pattern, not too dissimilar from the one we're looking at right now. Similar thing happened over here. Bitcoin was moving to the downside, moved into this symmetrical triangle pattern, and then since it was a continuation pattern, Bitcoin continued the trend. A lot of times what you'll see is that those patterns are kind of a pit stop. It's allowing the bulls or the bears, depending on who's in charge, to go get gas, use the bathroom, buy Mountain Dew, and then get back on the interstate. That's what those are for. They're road stops. They're gas stations, and that's kind of what we're seeing right here in the current market, where Bitcoin's moving to the upside. It's in this symmetrical triangle pattern, and it very well may break out here. It's not unlikely. That's why I'm saying that, because these patterns do tend to break bullish. But the problem comes when we start looking at the longer-term technicals for the current Bitcoin market, and we realize that this longer-term pattern that Bitcoin is in, this longer-term symmetrical triangle pattern here that Bitcoin is in, this is a continuation pattern also. And guys, you have to be unbiased with your technical analysis. As much as we might not like to admit it, this is a continuation pattern. Oh, excuse me. And don't get me wrong, Bitcoin sometimes will move into a continuation pattern like this, and it will break bullish even though it entered it as bullish, as bearishness. Sometimes Bitcoin will use this instead of a continuation pattern. It'll use it as maybe what you would call a contrarian pattern, and Bitcoin would break the opposite way from whence it came. That is possible, and that does sometimes happen. But guys, most of the time, triangle patterns, and that's what this longer term pattern is. It is a triangle pattern. It is a textbook triangle pattern. It is a long-term triangle pattern. You don't see triangle patterns this long often, but you do see them. They are almost always continuation patterns. And as we can see, Bitcoin was very bearish moving into this triangle pattern. If we move this here, we can see that if we were to draw an actual, if we were to come in here and try to analyze exactly how far the market should move based off of this, and we were to draw a price target for this, it gets bad. If we come here and draw the price target, this is how you would do a price target for a triangle pattern like this. You draw the length of the flag that went into it, and then you pull it down here somewhere, depending on where you want to draw it. That would put us going down to $500. Now, before you go in the comment section, I don't think we're going down to $500. I don't think we're going anywhere near there. That is just simply how you would typically draw the target for that. But even though I don't think we're going anywhere near $500, that is what the prediction would show. And what that means is that even though we might not be going towards $500, what that means is that since we were very bearish moving into the symmetrical triangle pattern, definitely when we break it, it's going to be a very catastrophic break. Now I say when, that when might be bullish, that when might be bearish, but when we break it, whether it's bullish or whether it's bearish, it's going to be a significant breakout, and it is going to be a very big deal, and we are going to see a lot of price action following it. Bitcoin is going to break in a very big way, and it is going to be very important for the market. And if Bitcoin breaks bearish, that's going to be very strong. And as I've talked about in previous videos, if Bitcoin breaks bearish here and it does start moving to the downside, it is going to break that 200 weekly moving average, and that is going to be very bad for the long-term technicals of Bitcoin. I've discussed that at length in other videos. If you go back on the BLX exchange, the chart, you can see how Bitcoin reacted to the 200 weekly moving average over here in the 2014-15 bear market. Bitcoin stayed above it. We want Bitcoin to do the same in this bear market. Now, whether or not it does that will depend on what the market does. It depends on our technical analysis. But based on the game of statistics and probabilities that we've been discussing, it seems that Bitcoin will actually be breaking bearish out of the symmetrical triangle pattern. Now, like I said, guys, Bitcoin technical analysis and technical analysis in general, no matter what market you're working on, is never a game of certainties. It is always a game of statistics and probabilities. Excuse me excuse me, sorry about that. Bitcoin and technical analysis is always a game of statistics and probabilities, and oftentimes what you'll find is that even though you might say, with 70% certainty, X is going to happen, Y still has a 30% chance of happening, and it sometimes happens. How often have you looked at the weather and the forecaster has said that there is a 70% chance of rain today and then it didn't rain? Or there's a 20% chance of snow today and it snowed like you have never seen before in your life? How often does that happen? It happens. I mean, it does. It happens because because predicting the weather is not a game of certainties. There's too many variables that go into it for it to be perfect. And Bitcoin is similar to meteorology in that factor, in that sense that it's impossible to predict it with 100% certainty unless you are the one moving the market. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to go moving the market just yet. Now, maybe we will in the future, but we don't at the moment. So it is very likely, or not very likely, I should say. Let's be precise in our language here. It is somewhat likely that Bitcoin does break bearish out of the symmetrical triangle pattern. And of course, there's other things that we can look at too. If we look at our volume, for example, it's very important to look at volume in triangle patterns. Of course, Bitcoin was in a descending triangle pattern over here for a long time, and of course, volume was dropping off as you would expect it to in a descending triangle pattern, and then we saw the breakout. Bitcoin's volume is currently dropping off in this pattern, and of course, that's what you expect to see in a triangle pattern before the breakout. So, what are we looking at here? Well, it's very clear if we look at this pattern over here that Bitcoin, when it was in one of these patterns, and Bitcoin had entered this pattern bearish, and we saw bearish volume during that pattern, Bitcoin broke bearish. You say like A plus B plus C equals D. That's basically what we're looking at here. And technical analysis isn't that simple, but sometimes it can be boiled down in that way. And I think a similar thing is not necessarily definitely going to happen to Bitcoin here. It's very possible that Bitcoin bounces here. I think the fundamentals are very bullish. I think that 200 weekly moving average is very strong for Bitcoin. But guys, there is that chance that Bitcoin breaks bearish here, and I think it's slightly more likely that we do at this point, based on the technical analysis that I'm looking at. Guys, I want you to tell me in the comment section down below what you think of that technical analysis. Do you think Bitcoin's going to break bullish here and actually be able to move upwards and out of this symmetrical triangle pattern and start moving into a bull market sooner rather than later? Or do you think Bitcoin is going to break bearish here and start moving down below the 200 weekly moving average, maybe go bottom out at $3,000? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comment section down below on that. I'll tell you what I think. I think that there's a slightly higher chance that Bitcoin breaks bearish here and moves to the downside, and not quite that far. We're zoomed out more than I thought we were. It's very possible that Bitcoin here breaks out and moves to the downside, moves down here, maybe towards price targets that we've discussed in previous videos between $2,800 and $2,000 or so. We have the 400 weekly moving average down there. If we look at the 400 weekly moving average, I believe that's around, let's go ahead and look here. I believe that's around $1,800 right now, $1,900 right now. That's a potential level of support as well. I have to go onto a different exchange to see it because it's such a long-term moving average. Yeah, right here around $1,800. I expect Bitcoin would probably bounce somewhere in this zone right in here, between about $1,800 to $3,000, and then start moving to the upside. And it's very possible that Bitcoin only stays down there for a couple weeks because the bears get exhausted and Bitcoin bounces really, really strongly. It's very possible that Bitcoin does that, and to be honest, it's probably likely that if Bitcoin falls below $3,000, that it won't stay down there for very long. But it is also definitely possible that Bitcoin breaks it, period. And if Bitcoin does break it, it could be bad, it could be good. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be bad. But if Bitcoin comes down here, there is always that chance that Bitcoin's going to bounce bullish and start moving into a bull market. I think no matter what happens, Bitcoin is going to be getting confirmation of a bull market within the next 12 months. I've talked about that. I've made my prediction on that. I put my cards on the table. I think that that's a very good probability prediction. I think that's a very high probability prediction, and I think that's one that will come to pass. Anyway, guys, that is basically going to do it for today's video. I do appreciate you guys watching the video, and I do hope you are enjoying all the content here on YouTube. If you're in the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy, I hope you guys are enjoying the content over there. Like I said, guys, we had dozens of people join CT2A last week, and it seems so far that everyone's enjoying it. If you guys have any questions that are in CT2A, feel free to email me or get in touch with me on Discord or through the comment section, but you guys already know that. I discussed that in the introduction video. Anyway, guys, I am well and truly rambling now, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap the video up. I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.